Hey everyone, Social Solipsist here for another episode of 52 and 52, and this week I am taking a look at the Blackwell Legacy. Now, the Blackwell Legacy is a game that I've had for a long time, as is per usual, but had never really gotten around to doing for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is it is an old school point and click adventure, which, while I'm not adverse to, have obviously have their pitfalls that are well known. But Spencer, my friend, came to me and said, I played this and I enjoyed it, and so you should play it. And I said, all right, let's do this thing. And so months later, I decided, hey, why not? Let's drop into this and see how it goes. So, the Blackwell Legacy is the first in a series of 4 or 5 games, I believe. It was originally released in 2006, and then I think re-released it on Steam at some point or another, and I don't even know. The first thing that you'll probably think about that is that it seems a little antiquated for being released in 2006, and I would agree with that. The first issue that I had with this game was it booted full screen and had audio but no video. So that was fun. Apparently, it's an extremely common bug for people to run into on modern systems. I say modern with air quotes. So we were off to the races. So I had to switch it from Direct 3D to Direct Draw 5, I think, and apparently it natively runs at 640 by 480. Now, for those of you who haven't been gaming for too long, even in 2006, that was a little bit of a low resolution for a game to be running at. That said, that does appear to be the native number of pixels in the art, and I don't know if that's related to the engine that it was built in at the time, that it's more antiquated than it seemed. My understanding is that the founder of Wadget Eye Games, I think Dave Gilbert is the name, started off as like a fan game maker basically, which was a thriving community in the mid 2000s. Actually, is making point and click games, homebrew point and click games. So I don't know if that's part of the reason for some of the antiquated features, but I digress. So this game, it's a little antiquated. Visually, I will say that the pixel art in the game itself and the animated heads of the various characters look great. Obviously, they're running in a more limited color palette. Again, related to the antiquated nature of the thing. But I have no problem with that at all. I think it looks fantastic even now. I do wish that this game had an option to run somewhere between in a 640 by 480 window and in full screen, but I wasn't willing to fight it any more than I already had to get it to do so. But I digress. The next thing that I found a little jarring was I thought I was about to be in for a bad time, because the game opens with a monologue from the main character Rosa, and I was immediately struck with how mediocre her voice acting was and how stilted the pacing of the voice lines was. I was pretty surprised, all things considered, at the state of things. Thankfully, that one scene is a bit of an outlier, generally speaking. Her voice acting was not all that bad, although it is a little bit stilted by nature of her character, but much much if not all of the rest of the voice acting in the game is pretty top notch. Certainly nothing worth complaining about. I will say that some of the music is also a little bit limited, uninspired. Again, I don't know if that's related to the engine that is built in, or the composer that they got to do it, or who knows what. But nothing really extraordinary. And I think that did a little bit of a disservice to the otherwise generally fantastic visuals and those sorts of things. So, outside of that, moving on to the, I guess, talk about the plot and story and the length of the thing. It's only about 2-ish to 3-ish hours. You could probably rush through it in less if you really wanted to. But I was a little bit surprised at its length. This is very much sort of like, it feels like the first chapter of a game. And like I said, since this is a series, and given that, like I mentioned, there were a lot of people making these homebrew point-and-click adventures that were usually about an hour to 3 hours long. That's not entirely surprising. But in terms of a retail release, when minor spoilers here, the plot is basically the introduction to the hook and then a single investigation with no real climax. It's not super fulfilling. That said, there are certainly a lot worse ways to spend 2 hours. I was a little surprised that I had only spent 2 hours in the game, and I played it all in one sitting. I thought I had spent 3 to 4, but that doesn't change the fact that overall there are some issues with just, you don't feel like it's a full game. You feel like it's a first act. Aside from that, it also it has some of the same pitfalls as other older point-and-click adventures, particularly from Sierra and LucasArts, those sorts of, the complaints that you often hear about those games are somewhat present in this game as well. While this game is, I would say, a lot more grounded in telling a strong narrative, a strong linear narrative, I think the weakest part of it is when it tries not to do that. The parts where you have to connect the proverbial chicken to the proverbial pulley can be frustrating, and they aren't as obtuse puzzles as that. But occasionally, you run into a stumbling block in getting the story to progress, and you can't entirely understand why you can't do the one thing that clearly there's only the one thing left to do, and you can't figure out how to do that. And if you missed a discussion in Rose's apartment 20 minutes ago, you just have to find that again by trial and error. You can't permanently miss it, but given the natural flow, the natural progression of the plot in this game, having those puzzle stumbling blocks that were more common in other games of this genre, it really disrupts the flow, it disrupts the story. It really does a disservice to the experience that they're trying to have. Well, at least in my opinion. And I will gladly hear otherwise from others, but generally speaking, given that it's such a linear story and a clear-cut experience, some of those things I found a little bit jarring. I don't necessarily know if I'd want them all cut out entirely, or there are other ways to give the player more agency. while not succumbing to those old school pitfalls. I don't know. Um, let's see. Aside from all that, there were definitely some other elements that I found a little bit weird that didn't have the polish of a a full retail release game. Not only the short length, but some of the UI elements, the visual elements, the overworld map thing. I know it's such a tiny thing that you only look at for maybe a minute over the entire game, but going back to the main map to go to another location is just not very pretty. Yeah, I lots of little nitpicks I could make, but it's also at this point more than a 10-year-old game, so I have to let it have some stuff in there. Um, I could probably go on, but I can tell my brain is not entirely today. Today was long. Anyway, I could certainly think of a lot worse ways to spend 2 hours. I think as far as point and click adventure games go, it's not a genre I would like to see die, but I think it is a genre that has not aged well with time, and not many people are making such games these days. So, in the interest of maintaining the genre and in the interest of having more narrative driven experiences that can just focus on the story and the characters that they want to have, I would advocate picking this up if it looks at all interesting to you at all. If you're at all interested in a quick narrative driven adventure to go on, I I recommend this with reservations. I am probably going to play some or all of the other games in the series if they're similarly length, if they're just little episodes like this. I think that would definitely quench my thirst for some more detail that I didn't get in this particular game. So I may or may not come back to this. Anyway, that was a little rambly. These episodes have gotten pretty rambly. Anyway, thank you guys all for watching yet another episode of 52 and 52. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I will see you guys next time.
I feel like hell and I have to interview college kids.